How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and I am joined, as always, by Christian Slater. Christian, how you doing, man?
I'm all hopped up on John Wick, and now I'm going to kill you with a fridge magnet.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have taken you to the theater, but what can you do? All right, let's get into what I've been playing this week. And I guess we'll start with WWE 2K23. You know, it's probably what I played the most this past week. I've been trying to dig more into the My Rise mode, which is their story mode, career mode, you know, whatever you want to call it. And I actually really like it this year. I mentioned last week, there's two different ones. There's a men's career mode and a woman's career mode, and I'm starting off with the men's one, and they take you some interesting places. And you start off with start off with a bang, like you get a championship like right away. And where I am at now, I don't think I'm super far in, because I keep hearing people talk about like where this story goes, and I haven't gotten any of that stuff yet. So I assume I'm still pretty early in. Right now I have reformed Evolution with Randy Orton and like this created guy who I think has popped up in the previous story modes. I'm not positive. He looks somewhat familiar. At least the name sounded sounded familiar. I like it. You know, I think it's a lot better written than a lot of the career modes and story modes that they've done in the past, which granted isn't like a super high bar or anything like that. But it's definitely better this year. I fell off of last year's pretty hard. It got it was just too much. Like, so the way it works is in between matches, you're in like a locker room, and you'll see like physical other wrestlers in the room, or not even wrestlers, sometimes like people that are behind the scenes or whatever. And you can talk to them, and they'll trigger the either like more of the main story or these little side stories, which are typically just like 1 to 2 matches, and that's it. And you gain some XP and all that. Last year's, and I don't know, maybe this will eventually happen this year's. If it is going to happen, it hasn't happened to me yet. But last year's, you had to like switch between rooms. So you would have the option to be like, okay, see who's backstage, see who's in the management's office, see who's in like the hallway and the arena, like all this stuff. And it just got to be kind of a bit too much. And I think the reason why is for whatever reason, this game's loading times are atrocious. There was one last night when I was playing where I legitimately thought the console had locked up because the loading bar at the bottom was completely full, but it wasn't doing anything. And, I didn't have like a stopwatch out or anything like that, but I did kind of like check the time, and I was like, it's been at least like 2 minutes. And so it's just kind of odd. You know, it's like a really poorly optimized game when it comes to loading, I guess. I'm not exactly sure like what causes that, because the other sports game that VC makes, the NBA series, does not have punishing load times really at all. So I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot more going on with the WWE games, I guess, than, I don't know. You're putting 10 characters, fully animated characters on screen at once in basketball, and what, a max of 8 in the right. I don't know. Who knows? I don't make games. I don't claim to know how this all works, but it is shocking how slow the loading times are in a game that's on PS5 and Series X. But I really enjoy the game. I think this is, it's getting really good reviews, and the reception has been really positive, especially online. I follow a lot of people on Twitter that make custom wrestlers because some of the work they do is unbelievable. I mean, like, to the point where, it almost looks like it's an actual in-game, that the developers made character. Like, they do a really, really good job. So I follow a lot of those people, and from what I can tell, it's, last year's game was a breath of fresh air, especially with them taking the year off to try and fix a lot of the problems that they've had with the series. I liked last year's, but I think eventually it just got a little bit long in the tooth, and I kind of bounced off of it after a couple of months. This year's is, I think this game's got some legs to it. People seem to be pretty excited about this, and I think they made some really interesting decisions to kind of put some longevity into the game, because the showcase mode, which is their kind of like marquee mode, is not that long. You can do it in a couple hours. And I think them like kind of refining the GM mode, which adds longevity to the game, refining universe, which adds longevity to the game, and especially these two twin kind of story modes, the MyRise modes. I think it's really, they're trying to push it forward, because with any sports game, WWE gets a leg up because it has a narrative aspect to it. And other sports games, the debate of whether wrestling is a sport, because it's predetermined, for lack of a better term, they kind of fall into the sports game category, right? They have the advantage that they can do all these crazy extra modes that are besides just like, okay, let's do an exhibition match to try and get people to play the game for longer, because that's what ends up happening with most traditional sports games. Most of the time, people don't even make it to the end of when the season is. And what I mean by that is, the NBA season, the NHL season starts in October-ish, right? From working at a video game store in the past, you would start to see people trade in that game in January. So it's 3 months, 4 months if we're pushing it, February. And, the playoffs aren't even until, the NBA season is still going on. We're at the end of March. So, I mean, people would get tired of sports games pretty quick. And the wrestling games, it wouldn't be as quick because, they could create guys and kind of, get some extra life out of it that way. But, it doesn't take long, but I think that this game has definitely got some legs to it. And I'm really, for the first time in a while, like excited to see what they can do in the future. Obviously this isn't going to happen, but if I were them, with how well received this game is, man, I'd take next year off and give myself an extra year and see what you can do even further with it. And especially by then, it should be current gen only. And maybe that would help with some of the handcuffs that maybe potentially are making this game load weird and have some issues with that. I don't know. For a business decision, that'll never happen, but it would be cool to see what they could do with some more time. But I'm really enjoying it. And if you're on the fence of whether or not to check it out, this is a good year to get it. This is a solid one. Beyond that, the only other thing I really played was Uncharted Lost Legacy. They put it on PlayStation Plus. New PlayStation Plus games came out this past week, and so it's the Uncharted, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's the 2-pack that comes with Lost Legacy, which was like the DLC side thing for Uncharted 4, and then it comes with Uncharted 4, but these are the versions that are like optimized for PS5. So I had actually played through Uncharted 4 again last year, and it was just the PS4 version on the PS5. So I don't have a need to go back and play through it again just to see what it looks slightly better on PS5. Like that's, I don't need to do that. I just played the game not that long ago. But I've actually never played Lost Legacy, because when I played Uncharted 4 originally when it was released, I actually didn't buy it. I rented it because I was one of the few psychopaths left that were still going to video rental stores and renting videos and games every week until they shut down. Really. I honestly, the only reason I stopped renting movies and renting games is eventually we just moved too far away. And it just wasn't worth it. When I was living in an apartment and just a few miles down the road was a rental store. And so that was like a weekly tradition. But then when I bought my house, it was like, well, now this isn't just a 5 to 6 minute drive. This is now like a 20 to 25 minute drive. It's just eventually just wasn't worth it. But Lost Legacy, oh man, I was so geared up to come and talk today about how great this is and how I wish I would have played it when it came out. All the great things I was missing out, because I talked about it last week. I'm a huge Uncharted fan. Love those games. Some bullshit happened, and I'm not thrilled about it, because this isn't the first time this has happened with a Sony platform and me. I have a long, storied history with this. So I was playing Lost Legacy, and Lost Legacy being a DLC side story is not super long. And so I was playing along and playing along and playing along. And I always kind of do this. I don't know why. It's just the way my brain is. I always look up a walkthrough for a game and just kind of see how far along in the game I am. And I was on chapter 4, and there's only 8 chapters. And I was like, oh, I'm like almost halfway through this game. Cool. I might actually have this finished by the time I record this weekend, and I could talk about the whole game. Or at the very least, I'll have it done next week and talk about it then. So if you haven't played the game, chapter 4 is very long. It's a very long chapter. If you remember an Uncharted 4, there was the sections where you would get in the Jeep, and it was kind of like a pseudo open world concept. So they do that again in Lost Legacy, where you have a map, and there's no GPS, there's no direction telling you where to go. You just kind of have to follow the map. And you have these 3 temples that you have to go to, and one of which you have to solve a big puzzle, and then the other 2 are just kind of combat. And then once you do all 3 of those, then you open up this other kind of temple area, and then you go into that, and then the next chapter starts. But it takes a while. Like, the other chapters kind of blew by. So this was definitely like an hour and a half, 2 hours, section of getting through all this. So I get through all of it the other night. I finish it. I start the next chapter. I'm like well into that chapter, and I get to this big puzzle, and I actually got kind of stuck on the puzzle. So I looked it up in the walkthrough, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't have that much farther to go, and I'm almost done with this chapter. And so I was looking at the solution for the puzzle, and I was like, you know what? I'm really tired. I don't have the mental capacity to deal with this right now. I'm going to save my game, turn this off, and we'll get to it tomorrow. And it ended up being a couple days later. So yesterday, I was like, well, I want to jump back in. Let's solve this puzzle. It was yesterday afternoon. Like, all right, I'm good. It's the middle of the day. I'm sharp. I'm sharp right now. Let's go. And I turn it on, and I load the game, and the opening cutscene for the previous chapter starts. And I was like, oh, I must have loaded the wrong save. So I go to load my save, and all my saves are gone. I lost like 2.5 to 3 hours worth of progress. And I was like, I don't want to do this all over. I just don't. And I know this is like a horrible thing, because it's like, you should just persevere and get through. I just deleted the game. I was like, maybe one day I'll go back and do this, but not today. I just wasn't in the mood to deal with that. And it gave me like serious like PTSD of when the Vita came out. I don't remember how long between the Vita coming out and the game coming out, but Tearaway was a big game on the Vita that I got really into, and I really liked Tearaway. I thought Tearaway was amazing. And I ran into an issue where all of a sudden, like, my Tearaway save got screwed up. So at the time, I was like, oh, I don't really know what to do, and I couldn't really find any information online because Tearaway was a new game at the time, and I didn't know if... like, is this a common glitch? Is this going to get patched out perhaps? Like, I couldn't find any information. So, like, the big dum-dum that I am, I called Sony customer service. And the guy on the phone is like walking me through, how to try and recover my save and recover my account and all this stuff. And the instructions he gave me ended up wiping my entire PSN account at the time, all of my cloud saves, and because he had me do a reset on the system and it didn't back up to the cloud because it had reset the account. There was no account for it to back up to. I lost all my saves. And I was furious. And I just couldn't believe it. And I walked into work the next day, and I was telling my coworker about it. And he's like, oh, dude, I could have told you how to fix this. You should have just called me instead of them. So ever since then, I have just gotten to the point where if I lose a save, unless it's not that much progress, like 3 hours, I was just fried at that point. I went from being very sharp mentally to being fried within about a minute and a half span. It's just over and done with. So I don't know. Maybe I will pick up Lost Legacy again in the next couple of weeks and try and get back through it. But I was just done at that point. I could not hit delete fast enough. on that thing. So it's, it is what it is. I'm sure I will get around to playing it at some point, and I'm gonna have to find something else to play because man cannot live on WWE 2K23 alone. I got to have something else to play while I await my next kind of new game purchase. But yeah, for what I did play, and I essentially did play a little bit more than half of Lost Legacy. It is very good. It is I remember all the hype it was getting at the time. Very well deserved, well earned. That game is very good. There's something about the way those games play, as weird as they are, with the just press X to keep jumping higher and higher mechanic. Like, it just, I don't know. Those games get me, I guess. But yeah, so Uncharted, near and dear to my heart, but not near and dear enough, I guess, to put up with losing 3 hours of progress. Christian, you have any thoughts about Uncharted after watching me play?
I don't understand why they didn't cast me in the Uncharted movie. People say that Tom Holland and I are indistinguishable.
I agree. So before we get into the news, the only other thing I want to talk about, and not video game related, although there is a section of this thing that is very video game inspired, I want to give my thoughts on John Wick 4. So I went to see John Wick 4 yesterday, so Saturday. I'm putting this up on Monday. This movie, I assume, is going to do very well at the box office because most of the showings around here were pretty much sold out, so I ended up having to see it at 11 a.m. on Saturday. That was the only spot in our IMAX theater that I could sit in a normal seat and not up against the wall on one side, or all the way in the front or all the way in the back. And when I bought my ticket on Thursday. It wasn't that filled up. There was only maybe about 20 seats taken, and then I would say half the theater ended up filling up. When I was actually there. It's absolutely incredible. I think it might be the best John Wick that they have made, which I was very surprised that anything would top Part 3, because I really, really love Part 3. I thought that was amazing. I thought not the opening fight where he's fighting Boban, who, if you're not familiar, Boban Marjanovic is an NBA player who plays Ernest, the very, very tall man that Keanu Reeves fights in the beginning of John Wick 3. But the fight after that in the antiquities place with all the knives, I thought that was the high point fight scene I have ever seen in my life. There's just something about the simpleness of that scene and the casual brutality of that scene that is just unbelievable. So I've only ever seen. I only ever go to the movies once to see a movie. I know there's people that are like, oh, I've seen Deadpool 7 times, or, the Marvel movies, we went every week until it was out of theaters. I know people that are like that. I've just never done that. The Star Wars, when they did the new 3, the ones with John Boyega and Daisy Ridley, the first one was at The Force Awakens. I saw that twice because I went and saw it opening night. We went to a midnight Thursday night showing, and then I had some coworkers that wanted to go see it, and I was like, I'll go see it again. And then I saw John Wick 3 in theaters twice. And both times I saw John Wick 3, that fight scene that I was talking about in the antiquities thing got the loudest reaction out of all of them. And so I'm watching John Wick 4 yesterday, which is a long movie. It's almost 3 hours long. And it's moving along, and I was like, these fight scenes are really good. There's some really impressive fight scenes so far in this movie, but nothing that's wow. And I was like, oh, maybe they're saving it for the end. Maybe there'll be something towards the end of the movie that is just oh my God. And then, man, it hit. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but it is very, very Hotline Miami. It is unbelievably good. When I was looking at the not reviews of the movie, but just threads online about the movie, people posting their thoughts, I would say probably more than half, maybe 3 out of 4 comments were, holy shit, that overhead scene was amazing. It's definitely the thing that everybody is talking about from that movie, outside of, character stuff and, spoiler stuff. I mean, in terms of just things that happen in the movie, that seems to be the overwhelming favorite for all of the fight scenes in the movie, with good reason. I honestly think it might be the greatest action scene I've ever seen in my life. And, seeing it in IMAX was actually, it was weird because, there are times in that movie in IMAX where it kind of felt like this is just kind of blown up. And I know a lot of movies are, if they're not filmed specifically for IMAX, like the Nolan stuff is, sometimes they can see kind of feel blown up. Me personally, I go see movies in IMAX just because it's an experience I can't get at home. But I really want to see when John Wick 4 comes out and I can get like a 4K, like Dolby Vision, version of it. I want to really watch that scene again because there are times it didn't get blurry, but it did get a little disorienting. And I don't think it was the way the movie was filmed. I think it was just, it's shot from overhead. So it's a perspective you're not used to seeing. And there's a lot going on. And I want to see it not on a screen where I have to like physically move my head from side to side to see the entirety of the screen. I want to see it on my TV. So I'm looking forward to that. But I thought the movie was absolutely fantastic. I hope they do another one. I will watch John Wick until the end of time. It was so good. So that'll kind of wrap up what I've been playing and watching for the week. And we'll be back in just a moment with the news. And we are back with the news, and the first thing we're going to talk about is Paradox Interactive showed off a little bit more of their next life simulator, or not their first life simulator game called Life by You.
God, I don't want to be able to simulate my life.
Yeah, I don't want to simulate mine either. So The Sims has essentially been uncontested for a very long time. And this week in particular, with The Sims 4 getting its next big expansion, which actually to me looks like a pretty cool piece of content for the game, it is, of course, bringing back up that conversation of, man, The Sims 4 is getting old. When are we going to get The Sims 5? So now with Paradox's Life by You, and also another game that is coming out that does not have a release date called Paralives, this is really the first big push of competition for The Sims, although we do know that EA is working on The Sims 5. So Life by You, it looks a little rough. It is launching in early access in September. The Sims itself is certainly no graphical powerhouse because they want that game to be able to run on every platform imaginable. But The Sims does have what I would say is a pretty nice and distinct art style. I have never really been put off by anything in The Sims in terms of the way that it looks. Life by You has definitely got a very, I don't want this to sound derogatory, but it's got a very European look to it. And what I mean by that is obviously the architectural styles of Europe are very different than the architectural styles of Africa, of Japan, of America, of even Canada, Mexico, wherever. But it has that look of like, this is what Europeans think that American architecture looks like. Everything is like super, super modern. And if you live in America, unless you are doing a brand new build of your house, you don't live in some super modern house. You are most likely living in something that was made anywhere between the 50s and 70s. They just don't make houses, we're running out of space here. They're sure they're bulldozing places and putting up new builds, but, even then, they don't look like this. So it's got a little bit of an odd art style, but, it's early access. You never know. But the big kind of deal with this is kind of who's behind making that. And I don't necessarily mean like Paradox. If you're not familiar with Paradox probably best known for Crusader Kings. It's that their Paradox Tectonic studio is making it. And why that is important is that the gentleman in charge of Paradox Tectonic is Rod Humble. Rod Humble was incredibly involved with The Sims 2 and The Sims 3, and he was actually the vice president of the Sims division for Electronic Arts for a while. He actually ended up leaving, and where he went is very interesting because a lot of videos I watched occasionally I watch people that just do Sims content on YouTube. And I went back to their channels this week because I wanted to see what their thoughts were. And a lot of them brought up, man, this game kind of looks like Second Life. Well, it's interesting because Rod Humble ended up becoming like CEO of Second Life for a little while. And now he's at Paradox Tectonic. So this is kind of his brainchild. The trailer didn't show off a lot. It showed off a lot, but it also didn't show off a lot. There are things in there, quality of life things that Sims players have been asking for a really long time, like a color wheel. to change the color of an object instead of just having like palette squares at the bottom. So that was cool. The animation was like super clunky. They're really pushing that this game is like 100% customizable. Like you can customize the dialogue because it's in English. It's not the Simlish, the gibberish that the Sims speak. So you can create, dialogue and create these own stories and create your own job, and you can jump from any character to any character at any point in time. And it's open world. It's not, like zoned like The Sims is. So if you haven't played The Sims in a while and you've forgotten, or you've never played The Sims, so you kind of have your neighborhood and you can freely move about in the neighborhood. But then like, let's say you want to go downtown, you have to then like click on a menu and say, I want to travel to downtown, loading screen, then you go downtown. Whereas Life by You is going to be open. You can kind of go where you please. So I'm interested in seeing what happens with it. Paralives, the other one, which I haven't seen like a public update for that game in a while. They are seemingly still working on it. When I was watching the Sims people on YouTube talk about this, and they brought up Paralives, I assume they would be more in the know than I am. I'm sure they're keeping up with it. They seem like it's still active. It's not stopped development or anything like that, so it's still coming at some point. I thought the look of that game looked pretty cool, but if I remember right, in the videos for Paralives, they never really showed like their equivalent of Sims doing much. It was mostly like build mode stuff, or maybe that's just what I was watching because I'm more interested in the build mode stuff. So I don't know, maybe this will kickstart them showing off more of the game, but yeah, in a few months in September, we'll be able to get our hands on Life by You, and I'll probably check it out. I like The Sims. So next up, Respawn is opening a third studio that's going to be focused on Apex Legends, and the quote is, keeping Apex Legends going for 10 to 15 years. This is going to be headed up by Ryan Burnett, who is a veteran of the Call of Duty series, and the studio is going to be in Wisconsin. This makes a ton of sense because Apex Legends, it was a game that like got announced and released very quickly. It was in a matter of days, and I don't know how many people thought it was going to hang on, but probably not many, because that landscape of the battle royale shooter at the time was like super saturated. Fortnite was still on the way up. PUBG, I think, was still pretty dominant at the time. And, as we saw, there have been a lot of people trying to get to that throne, and Fortnite's the only one that's really stayed at the top. PUBG is, still has its player base and it's fallen down, but Apex Legends has carved out a really solid chunk of that marketplace for itself. So them, opening another studio to focus on this, that makes sense. They've, Respawn's working on something else. I don't know. I don't think they've really said what it is. I think it is a first-person shooter, but I can't remember. And then obviously, they got the Star Wars stuff. Jedi. The next Star Wars Jedi game is coming out in a matter of weeks. It's like almost a month from when this video game is coming out, or when this video is coming out. It's almost a month. I think it's April 28th. So I think it shows that they are committed to Apex Legends by opening another studio to keep it going, breathe new life into the series. I haven't played Apex in a while. I got really into it when it came out. I thought it played really, really well. I picked it back up here and there a few times over the years, but it just got to the point where I can't keep up with the battle pass, and the skill gap, is just too far. I don't think I ever won in PUBG. I don't think I ever got a battle royale win in PUBG. Maybe once. At one point in time, I was like streaming. I used to stream on Twitch all the time. And at one point I was streaming PUBG like 3 times a week, and like really, really into it, and had a group of people I was playing with. And I don't remember if we won. I know in Warzone, I've won a couple in Warzone. And then in Apex, I actually won probably a dozen times in Apex. And, there's people that win all the time. To me, it's a big deal because I'm just not that great at video games in general. So, I kind of have that soft spot for Apex. It's like, oh, that was the one that I was kind of good at, So I always like to try and check in every few months to see like, oh, what's going on with Apex. I'll watch some gameplay on YouTube or something and kind of see how things have changed. But, I don't think it's something that I'm going to pick back up anytime soon, but I'm glad that they are are keeping it going. And then speaking of keeping things going, let's talk about the opposite of keeping things going. And EA is shutting down some of the Battlefield games. This is going to happen at the end of April. They're dumping Bad Company 2, which are, some of the most beloved Battlefield games ever released. I have a buddy of mine who, I can't remember if it was Battlefield Bad Company 1 or 2. I think it was 2. He had hundreds, if not thousands of hours put into that game. Like, he was really, really into that. The other one that they are dumping is Battlefield 1943, which, if you don't remember 1943 was an online-only one. I think it only had 3 maps. Maybe they added another one at some point. It ended up getting re-released a little while ago. I think it was at the time exclusive to Xbox. I can't remember if that's true or not. But I played the shit out of that game. There was something about Battlefield 1943 that just really clicked with me. And it's, there's only been a handful of games in my life that are online games that I would say that I got obsessed with. And, like Modern Warfare 2, the current Call of Duty, I've probably got a few hundred hours into it. I wouldn't even call that obsessed. I'm talking about like games like Unreal, where Unreal was probably at one point in my life the only video game I played for about 2 years. Like, I just ignored all other video games and only played Unreal. Like the Civilization games over time, I put thousands of hours into them. Something about Battlefield 1943, I was playing it for hours every night. Just could not get enough of it. Just really, really enjoyed it. So it's sad to see that is going away, but that's what happens. Servers get shut down, player counts go down. Maybe somebody finds a way to get private servers running, and maybe there's a life after death for these games. It has happened with other franchises before, but who knows? But it's a shame because I think a lot of Battlefield players have been really disappointed with the game in recent years. And I was a big Battlefield player. I kind of switched off Call of Duty for a while, and I was all in on Battlefield. And watching that series go down and down and down, especially with the last one, when that first trailer for the last Battlefield came out, I think a lot of people were like, oh my God, like, this looks great. Like, this game might be back. Like, they might be giving Call of Duty a run for its money. And they didn't even come close. That game tanked hard. And I remember playing it, and I remember playing the, was it a beta or just a demo or a preview or whatever they did before the game actually came out. And every time I played it, the fire button, like the pressing down the mouse button, was just stuck, and it would just empty my clip. And then I would like run through walls and just die. And I was just like, what is this game? Like, this is like, it almost seemed like it was beyond just being like a buggy game. It was like this like avant-garde piece of art that Electronic Arts put out. It was very bizarre, and it's such a shame to see where that franchise has gone. Maybe one day they'll get back on top. Gotta stay hydrated. All right. Next up, the Candyman has apparently leaked when Spider-Man 2 is coming out. So Tony Todd, who apparently will be playing Venom in the game, told a fan that the game is coming out in September. The quote was, looks like September, massive publicity coming in August, commercials start dropping in August, so I'm told, hold on to your ... and hold breath, gonna be necessary. Apparently he has since backtracked that and was like, oh, I never said that. But it looks like they're probably targeting September for Spider-Man 2. So Spider-Man 2 is my most anticipated game of the year. That and Starfield. And this upsets me with it coming out in September, because that means that Starfield and Spider-Man would be coming out potentially right now in the same week. I don't think that would actually happen. I don't think they would do that, but coming out in the same month. I was really hoping we were going to have a breather, because Starfield's coming out in the beginning of September. I was hoping maybe we would get Spider-Man, in October at some point and have some time in between. So now I'm going to be fighting, switching back and forth between these two games, because I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm just glad that it looks like that. Yes, this game is coming out finally. No delays. We're just going to get it this year. I really hope they don't push it back, because I have said it 100 times on this show. It is the game I am looking forward to the most. So yeah, September, it's going to be, there's I've talked about it before, like June's a slammed month this year, and it looks like September is going to be a busy month. And I don't know if that's just because there's so many good games coming out that people are interested in that, they can't help it but to kind of bunch them together to get their games on the release calendar. Or maybe it's just poor planning. Who knows? But it's, we're going to be ramping up this year. We got some heavy hitters coming out this year, and, it should make for an enjoyable year. And at the end of the year, Game of the Year should be a lot more competitive than it was last year. Last year was a little bit of a struggle to kind of make my choices. Outside of Immortality was the clear runaway last year, but the rest of the games, it was a little bit of a struggle to be like, did I really consider this one of the best games of the year? I guess I played it and I liked it. I don't know. This year is going to be, I think we're going to be making a lot more cuts to the list instead of just like, well, I guess it makes the list because I played it. But we'll go from there. So I guess one of the big controversial stories of this week was that Ubisoft showed off some AI tools that are aiming to support script writers. And of course, people kind of ran away with this thing saying, going full on South Park, they took our jobs. That this thing, which is designed to write barks, essentially, and barks are just like things you hear NPCs say while you're walking through a crowd in a video game, is going to, replace writers on video game teams. And I don't think that that's what this is about. I'm sure at some point, some businessman at some studio will be like, yes, let's just make AI replace all these people, and then we don't have to pay them salary anymore.
Maybe you should get some AI to remind you to trigger my fucking witty repartee.
That's not a bad idea. I'd like to get some AI to just erase you from my life. They kind of, they didn't backtrack on their statement, but they did kind of issue an update on what they were talking about. And really, I think what they are getting at is that there are so many lines of dialogue, especially like an open world game, like a Grand Theft Auto, an Assassin's Creed, a Watch Dogs, all that stuff, that having one person or even a team of people just write all these things can just get repetitive. And having some AI that can do a first draft that gets touched up is not the worst idea in the world. And a lot of people are immediately jumping to, oh, this is going to kill jobs and all that stuff. But think about it from the other side. Think about it if you were just one person making a game, or maybe a team of less than 20 people, and you need help writing your script and filling all this stuff because you're pressed for time because you need to be focused on something else. Why not use a tool like this to help you out? The Nextlander podcast last week brought up a really good example of SpeedTree. So SpeedTree is a piece of software that just populates trees in video games and makes it easier, because it just became such a monotonous task. And when do we get to the point where writing NPC dialogue is just a monotonous task that we can charge off to an AI to take care of? The thing is, and I've played around with ChatGPT, and I am too tired to get into it today, but I I'll pull it up. I had ChatGPT write me like a bit of an article about how this works. And it was really interesting to read. So I'm going to read just a snippet of this. I can't remember what question I asked ChatGPT, but I think it was something along the lines of, will AI be able to replace a human dialogue writer, specifically to video games? And this is part of what it wrote, which is interesting. One area where AI can be particularly useful is in generating dialogue for video game characters. Traditionally, the task has been the responsibility of human writers who must come up with engaging and believable dialogue that fits within the context of the game story and characters. This process can be time-consuming and labor-intensive, particularly for large-scale games with numerous characters and branching storylines. AI systems, on the other hand, can be trained on vast amounts of text data, including books, movies, and video games, to learn patterns and structures in language. This training can enable AI to generate dialogue that is more natural sounding and better suited to the tone and style of the game. So the biggest thing about this is, I don't think as amazing as this AI thing is being, and this isn't even true AI, this is just chat. This thing is just spitting stuff back out at you. It does feel. There are times where it feels very natural, like a human has written this, but there are also times where it's like, okay, a machine wrote this because it's totally broken or, inaccurate. As somebody who's done a lot of writing in his life, and seeing where AI can go, there is no way on earth that AI is ever going to be able to replace a human when it comes to creative fiction. It can certainly, I'm sure that it could analyze a news report and spit out like an AP Newswire article that summarizes the events. And I'm sure it can do things like barks in a video game for random NPCs. What it will never be able to do is the passion and creativity that a human has in their brain in write engaging and engrossing storylines and dialogue. It's just never going to be able to do that. It just can't. It can't think like that. And I know we see it in movies all the time, like Terminator. It's like, oh, it's gonna, they're gonna turn against us and blah 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 and all this stuff. Maybe it will, but it still can't create passionate thought. I just don't believe that. And if it ever does, then yeah, we're screwed and the Terminators are coming to take us over. But I think Ubisoft is getting a lot of flack for this, probably simply because of the fact that it's Ubisoft and they're an easy target these days. But I think we're taking this a little bit too far. Don't think about it from the perspective of a massive corporation laying off all of its people to be replaced by AI. Think of it more as a massive tool that can affordably help a small team of devs making a game. All right. Next up, everybody's favorite thing, Arcane. I love Arcane simply because of the fact that they make 9 million trailers for games over the course of years to the point where you're sick of looking at it and you never want to play the game. I'm just not a fan of Arcane stuff, but they showed off more of Redfall because as Arcane delays games quite frequently, they just keep showing more and more and more and more and more of the game. If I saw one more Deathloop trailer, I was going to go on a killdozer rampage. Like, I just couldn't take it anymore. But they finally had a hands-on event with Redfall, and it's been very interesting. A lot of articles are super positive, like the one from Video Games Chronicle, which is says, this is paraphrasing, Redfall is shaping up to be the studio's strongest shooter to date. And then other people are like, this game is butt. This game is terrible. And then IGN's like, no, it's great. Like, it's so mixed all over the place. But I will say that, the big thing that's kind of coming out of this is, it is getting mixed reviews, but it's kind of assuaging people's concerns about, do I need to play this game with other people to enjoy it? And it looks like you can totally 100% play this game as a single player game and be perfectly fine. To the point where there are also things coming out that Arcane is actually looking at potentially trying to remove the always online requirement for this game. Because I've always thought the always online requirements for single player games make zero sense. I'm looking at you, NBA 2K. Why do I need to be online to play a single player basketball game? But I decided, I've seen so much footage of this game. I'm kind of sick of seeing it, but I was like, let me take a look and see what this looks like. And I'll give him this, and it doesn't look bad. Like, this is the first time, where I have looked at this game and thought, I guess maybe I'll check it out. It is going to be on Game Pass. So, aside from the cost of your monthly Game Pass subscription, there's no extra financial burden upon you to play this game. And, I very much was in the camp of, I don't care if this game is free for me to play. I'm just not interested in it. I don't like the way that Arcane games look. I don't like the way that Arcane games play. But after seeing this last one, it kind of got me a little bit to the point where it was like, I guess I can download it and try it out for a night and see if it's all right. Even if every bone in my body is telling me that don't do it because you just won't like it because you just don't like their games. But I did it with all the Far Cries. Every time Far Cry would come out, I'd buy it and go, oh, I can't wait to play Far Cry. It looks so good. And then I get 5 hours into it. Why did I buy this? I wasted my money. And then a few years later, the next Far Cry comes out. Oh, I can't. That game looks so good. I can't wait to pick it up. I can't wait to play it. And I play it for 2 hours this time. Why did I buy this game? I don't like this game. I did the same thing with Deathloop. I played Dishonored and I didn't like Dishonored. And then Deathloop came out and I was like, oh, Deathloop. Let me get Deathloop. And I traded it in a week later because I didn't like it. I just keep doing it to myself. I can't stop it. So yeah, that being said, I'm sure I'll probably check it out. Next up was on the lighter side of things. Lego 2K Drive got announced. This has been the worst kept secret over the past couple of weeks. It kept getting leaked that this game was coming out. It is a AAA driving, what they're calling driving adventure. It's coming out in May, so it's coming pretty quick. And essentially it is Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts. So you are making your own car, basically, and driving it around.
I made my own car once. I used a dead snake in a tissue box to make my own shifter. It ran on piss.
God. All right. The trailer sells this game very well. At one point, they are driving a hamburger car, and then the hamburger car goes off the side of a hill and lands in the ocean and turns into a boat. Sadly, not a hamburger boat or even a hot dog-shaped boat. I would have gone for that. I'm going to play this game. So I like Lego quite a bit. I will say that, I am the type of person that buys a Lego set and puts the Lego set together per the instructions in the appropriate order to create the, what is on the picture on the box. I don't have a creative bone in my body when it comes to making, my own Lego set. I remember my father was at my house once and he saw one of my Lego sets and he was like, oh my God, did you come up with this yourself? This is amazing. I was like, no, that is very much what the instructions told me to do. I could not come up with something like this. I remember checking out Nuts and Bolts and I thought Nuts and Bolts was cool. I couldn't stick with it for one reason or another. But this, I don't know, something about this, it's also coming out in May. There's not a lot coming out in May I know for most people, it's Zelda. I'm not interested in Zelda, so I don't even have a Switch at this point, so it's not like I could play it if I wanted to play it. So I think that this will be a fun game. What's interesting about it is who's making this. So this is VC Visual Concepts. We talked about them before because they make NBA 2K and WWE 2K. So now they are doing Lego 2K. So I'm curious to see what they can do. People can bitch and complain all they want about Visual Concepts for how, microtransaction-y their games have become. And that is a very valid complaint because it is 100% true. But at the end of the day, NBA 2K is like the best playing basketball game there has ever been. Like the actual act of playing the game, playing basketball in the game is incredibly good. The wrestling games, as we mentioned earlier, they are getting there. They are good, not amazing. So they know how to make a good game, gameplay wise. We'll see if this game ends up being loaded with microtransactions. I would be surprised if it is, simply because Lego as a company is super strict on how their product is viewed in the world. That's why there are no realistic weapons in Lego sets. They don't do anything super violent related, the most violence that they've ever had, or the Star Wars minifigures have lightsabers and blasters. They just came out with that Lord of the Rings set. I don't know if any of those characters have weapons in their hands or not. I'm not a Lord of the Rings person, but I know that it's a fantasy world, so they don't have guns. Maybe swords or something like that. They've had swords because the medieval theme has been a long-standing tradition with Lego. But, Lego is smart enough as a company that I'm sure they've done their research on microtransactions and seeing, as they are a European company and as European lawmakers have been really coming down hard on microtransactions and, the blind box mechanics, saying it is essentially gambling. I would be surprised if they would be okay with having that in there, but, I guess remains to be seen. The one downside I will say, and obviously it's tough to say that there's a downside to a game that isn't out yet and nobody has really played. It does look like at launch, it does appear that after launch, at some point you will be able to, but at launch of the game, you will not be able to take the cards that you have made and share them online. So you won't be able to download other people's creations, which kind of sucks. But they did say it is coming at some point. All right. Next up, Aliens Dark Descent got its release date and gameplay video. This was briefly shown, I want to say, at one of the Sony State of Plays. We got like a really brief trailer for this that showed just a small smidgen of gameplay at the end. And the gameplay at the end actually looked a lot like the last Alien game, which was kind of like that isometric look, sort of like a Diablo. But this trailer showed it with like full HUD, and it is actually a kind of a cross between Diablo and XCOM. It doesn't seem to stop time. It was hard to tell that it's almost like a real-time XCOM. But I mean, they showed like the icon on the screen, when you watch the trailer they had with a PlayStation hub or a PlayStation control element to it, where it's like, you're moving the reticle on screen, press square, and then it moves your squad, and your squad moves as a whole. And they mentioned like, when you assign your squad to a task, it'll automatically take the person in your squad best suited for the task and apply them to the task. It has permadeath, which is a big XCOM thing. It's a very popular thing in tactical games. This is not what I expected. I expected this to just kind of be not a twin stick shooter, but more like a twin stick shooter, I guess, where it was just going to be a fast paced kind of isometric action game. So this is definitely a different spin than I expected. I was looking at the comments on the trailer video, and people seem to be into it. I think it looks cool. I think it's gonna be a tough sell because the Aliens game, or the Aliens name, when it comes to video games, has been so tarnished for such a long time that this is a tough one. I almost feel like maybe they should have just been like, hey, this will be on Game Pass, and done it that way. But I'm not privy to the developer's financial situation. Maybe that wasn't going to work for them, but I think that this is going to be a really tough sell for people. So it's going to have to get really good reviews out the box. And if it doesn't, then I think unfortunately we're in a situation where maybe they do sell it off to Game Pass, or we see it on sale fairly quickly and they don't, potentially don't recoup their budget. But as of what we've seen so far, it looks pretty cool. And then the last up for this week, kind of something that I didn't think would happen really, is Counter-Strike 2 is happening. So Counter-Strike is one of the longest running first-person shooter games. It's been out since the 90s. They sort of, it's not a sequel, but the updated version, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, most people know it as CS:GO, came out over 10 years ago at this point and has become the de facto game. It's still, I think to this day, the most played game on Steam, so it's a hugely popular game. And it didn't really seem like Counter-Strike 2 was a possibility simply because it didn't seem like it was really needed. They would just kind of keep iterating on CS:GO, but we are getting a full-on Counter-Strike 2, and it's coming out this year. And it looks cool. It looks good. They did these very odd videos. Instead of just doing like a trailer for the game, they did these like 3 smaller videos that talk about how the game is going to work. And I don't know enough about Counter-Strike because I have not played CS:GO at all, and I haven't played vanilla Counter-Strike since the early 2000s. So honestly, I don't know a lot about what they're talking about, but it has people very excited. And so this is like a really interesting year when you think about it. We're getting a new Counter-Strike, a new Zelda, a new Street Fighter, a new Tekken, a new Mortal Kombat. Like, these very long-running franchises are like back on top of the video game discussion. Zelda never really dropped off. Mortal Kombat's been hot for a while. Tekken has been hot since the last one, but it fell off for a while before that. Street Fighter's been on a downward turn, but it looks like Street Fighter 6 is going to be very good. So it's kind of like, some of these franchises have been around for a while and they've been on top the entire time. And some of these franchises are on the way back up, and some are trying to maybe redeem themselves. So it is a very interesting year. And I think fast forward to December 31st, I think we're going to look back on this year, barring any major delays, as like, man, this is like the biggest year in a while for video games. Maybe not every game is going to be a knockout, game. But in terms of like big franchises having big releases, like could potentially be a pretty good year, for people playing video games. So yeah, I think it's cool. I'll try Counter-Strike 2 out. When it comes out, I'll give it a chance. But that's gonna wrap it up for the news. So if you follow along on YouTube, I put up a community post the other day. I am nearing completion. I was actually surprised how much work I got done on it this past week. Nearing completion of the next traditional Perfect Reload video. So since I have kind of relaunched the channel over the past few months, I have not done one, simply because it's very time consuming. I just didn't have the time to do it. So a lot of you are probably newer to the channel and have not seen one of these. You can go back and watch one of the previous ones. I'm not trying to hype this up like it's some, great thing, but for me personally, I feel it's a big accomplishment because these videos do take a very long time to do, regardless of if it ends up being a good video or not. I'm just happy that I got through it and got it done and kind of showed myself once again that like you can do this, you can get this done. Because when I stopped the channel, I put the channel on pause. I was in like the process of making 2 of these, and with like a third script being written. Like I was like the machine was churning, and then I kind of, I stopped, and it's like, do I even want to do it again? Can I do it again? Can I make them decent? And so, I don't know if this video is going to be any good. I'm just happy that it's going to be done. There is the very, very, very slight chance that it comes out this week, but I would say it's probably going to come out next week. I'm about 70% of the way done. So it's going to be within the next couple of weeks. But yeah, so be on the lookout for that. But other than that, thanks for hanging out. Christian, any parting words before we go?
Check back next week for more unneeded thoughts on video games from a lonely sack of shit.
Thank you. Take it easy, everybody. We'll be back again next week.